Have you ever described yourself as low maintenance and felt proud of it? Like it meant you were easy to be around or easy to love? Do you find it difficult to ask for help, not because you don't need it, but because something in you would rather handle it alone than risk being a burden? When someone offers you support, do you feel a little uncomfortable, like you owe them something now? And have you ever suppressed what you needed in a relationship and then told yourself that it wasn't that important, that you'd rather keep the peace, and then resentment builds anyway? Do you overfunction for everyone around you while you wonder why no one seems to show up for you in the same way? In today's episode, we're going to talk about the hidden trauma behind being quote unquote low maintenance, and why what looks like being easy and chill on the outside is often intense, invisible stress on the inside. We're going to talk about how suppressing your needs and not asking for help and overfunctioning and feeling guilty is rooted in a conditioned somatic pattern that keeps you braced in life and self-abandoning and stuck in that feeling that life is hard no matter what you do. Welcome to The Simple Source, a paradigm-shifting space where self-love, healing, spirituality, and personal growth are redefined. If you've been told healing takes years, that abundance must be attracted, or that transformation requires struggle, you haven't been told the truth. I'm Linda Villines, a certified trauma-informed holistic coach, author, and spiritual guide. After healing myself from chronic conditions, complex trauma, and lack, not by following traditional frameworks, but by creating my own, I'm now teaching you to love, heal, and free yourself, mind, body, and soul, so you can reclaim your highest health, happiness, and potential with joy and ease. Each week, we go beyond surface-level self-help and into the real mechanics of transformation. If the traditional paths to healing and spirituality haven't produced the changes you want in the life you desire, you're in the right place. You were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. Let's get started with today's episode. People think that being low maintenance is a strength, that needing less, asking for less, and taking up less space somehow makes you easier to love, easier to be around, easier to move through the world. But it really doesn't. What being low maintenance actually does is put your nervous system in a state of chronic stress and labor, while you silently agree to stay small, while your own authentic self is shoved into a corner, being unloved, unseen, including by you. And so that pattern is not independence. It's not an easygoing nature, and it's not emotional maturity. It's actually a conditioned form of self-abandonment that makes life harder, not easier. And it lives in your body as a struggle imprint that you may have never even recognized as struggle. And so if someone has ever called you low maintenance like it was a compliment, you probably took it as one. Maybe you even tell people that you meet, yeah, I'm pretty easy to get along with. I don't need that much. Like you are proud of that, because we're all taught to believe that and to behave that way. Don't be too much. Don't be too loud. Don't take up too much space. But the truth is, and what we're going to unpack in this episode, is that low maintenance doesn't really mean that you're easygoing. What it meant is that you learned probably very early in life that your needs were an inconvenience, that what you wanted was too much or caused trouble or stress for other people. So that version of you who asked for things, who felt and expressed things loudly, who needed to be held or seen or loved unconditionally as their authentic self, that version didn't feel safe existing. And so you learned to edit them and edit them and edit them until this false version of you is who you now believe you are. And now your whole life just constantly feels harder than it should. And not because you're actually too much or that you ask too much. Clearly, if you're low maintenance, you aren't asking for that much. So it's the opposite. It's because you've been asking for nothing, really, not expressing your needs or your desires or your dreams, not demanding to be seen or to be loved. And so all of that demand is internalized on yourself. When you consistently suppress your needs, that means that your nervous system is working constantly to accommodate for that suppression, like literally. So when you override a need, your body doesn't just like go, okay, no biggie, we're just gonna send it to the ether and that need is gone. That's not what happens. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain that processes being hurt in social environments and pain and self-monitoring, that stays active, it stays alert. And so that means that you are still neurologically very vigilant. You're not chill, right? Because you're just like keeping track all the time of whether you are too much, whether your chill level is acceptable, whether you feel safe. And that is not an easeful state, low maintenance state. That's your nervous system in stress and in survival mode. And sure, that may be happening under the surface, but still it's a relentless and very exhausting state that your body is forced to exist in on your behalf all day, every day. And so this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to break that down, why seeming low maintenance on the outside is actually one of the highest maintenance states for your nervous system. Chronic self-suppression keeps your system in low-grade sympathetic activation, which is your survival stress response, because your body interprets self-erasure the same way as it does any other threat, because it is a threat. Like all forms of chronic stress, it's just so normalized that people don't even question it. They don't even question whether or not peace is authentic or contrived or performed. So in truth, being low maintenance is not you choosing peace, okay? Not in a way that your body feels as genuine peace, because your body is actually bracing while you are trying to appear low maintenance. So that means your body is actually tense. It's chronically stressed. And you just think that that's normal. And so that means also that your body is struggling to maintain regulation. Now, like many women, I went through a phase where I thought being chill and low maintenance would make me more desirable, especially after being told many times by my parents as a kid that I was a lot, or too emotional, or too loud, or too much, or too this, or too that. And so my defense mechanism, my survival adaptation, was to swing the other way and become like super easygoing, right? The girl who had a tough skin, who didn't cry, who didn't let other people bother her. Now, of course, underneath all of that facade, that mask, was a fuck ton of anger and resentment and grief and self-hatred. And so, of course, that inner stress, all of that suppression of my needs, my true voice, my true self, my true emotions, resulted in various chronic conditions. And so I spent decades chronically unwell with anxiety, depression, all kinds of digestive issues, all kinds of inflammatory conditions. And so on the outside, I might have seemed like fine or strong or easygoing, chill. Underneath that was a very unhappy, unhealthy mind, body, soul. And then when I started choosing myself, choosing to love myself unconditionally, when I started to invest in real authentic healing, not just in biohacks, but reconnecting to my soul, to my authentic self, to loving my whole authentic self, that's when decades of chronic conditions resolved on their own. After many years of trying all the fads and biohacks, it was that, because all of that inner stress, that inner tension that had built up over decades, was no longer organizing my body and instructing my nervous system. Fear was no longer at the helm. Love for myself was. And yes, that meant I was less agreeable. I was less chill, and that I compromised and I settled less. And ultimately, I did stop abandoning myself for the sake of being pleasant or easy to be around or accommodating. But what happened was I resolved decades of being unhappy and unhealthy, because I was free from all of that inner stress and tension that was trapping my body, trapping my nervous system in a chronic state of stress. And then that meant, of course, that my mind and my body could then finally truly heal. And that's what they did. So I get this low maintenance allure. I really do. But it's not serving you. And, there's a real difference between an innate peace and ease of existence that isn't performed, that isn't a compromise, that isn't you settling your authentic self, which is just coherence, right? That's a true ease in the world and your existence. And then there is the performative low maintenance, which is what we're talking about in this episode, which is what many people perform. So let's just talk about that belief first that drives that low maintenance allure, that conditioning. And it's an old belief that so many people have lived with for so long that they don't even question it. And that belief is primarily, if I need less, then life is going to be easier. Now, another variation of that belief is, if I ask for less, relationships will be safer. And then another variation of that is, if I take up less space, I will be more loved. And that's maybe equally as big as that first belief. But firstly, those beliefs are not rooted in any truth. They're rooted in unresolved relational trauma, which means that they don't actually reflect your highest truth or the truth of the world. They reflect your fears, they reflect your unresolved stresses and emotions. And then that means that they created a condition where your nervous system never really got to stop working in overdrive. Because when needing itself becomes dangerous, your brain then has to build an entire neural network to manage that danger. And that's part of what neuroscience calls predictive processing, when your brain is constantly predicting scenarios about what's about to happen and then adjusting your behavior to avoid potential threat in those scenarios. But here's the irony, here's the catch. When your brain learned to anticipate that your own authentic self being too much was unsafe, then that prediction never really switches off, because your authentic self is the baseline of your existence. Even underneath the masks and facades and the performances, your authentic self may be buried, but they are still there, always there. That's the truth of who you are. And so if your brain believes that your authentic self is too much, unsafe, then it will scan every conversation, every interaction, every moment of a potential real need in you, and essentially ask, is it safe to be the real me right now? And unfortunately, if you haven't healed those relational traumas and released them from your body, and you're still living with that being low maintenance keeps me safe and belonging belief, that answer is usually no, it's not safe to be the real you. And that is not a peaceful or regulated way to live, friend. That's fucking exhausting. And then here's the other thing that people don't get. It's that when people complain about how they struggle because everything in life is hard, everything about work, relationships is hard, there's always some conflict, some level of like heartbreak, some heavy issue that just keeps popping up for people. This is hard, that is hard. I hear it all the time, all day long. But that's not actually where the exhaustion is coming from. Your exhaustion, you think, is because everything in life is hard, but the exhaustion is actually a result of thousands of small moments throughout your day, every single day, where you quietly disappear, where you erase yourself, where you erase your truth, your needs, your authenticity, where you edit the ask to make the ask smaller and less demanding before you ask, where you say, I'm fine when you're not really fine, where you feel something real and then you immediately negotiate with yourself whether it's even acceptable to feel that acceptable feeling. And that constant negotiation and suppression of your truth and your authenticity, that's the real struggle. Not that everything in life is hard. It's just that you are refusing your own needs and truth and authenticity. And so now I want to talk about interoception, which is your body's ability to sense its own internal state. Like if you're hungry, if you feel tense, an emotion, when you need to pee, any bodily sensation. Now, when you spend years, likely decades, overriding those signals, your interoceptive pathway actually down regulates, meaning your body stops sending those signals as loudly as before, because you've basically, through ignoring them repeatedly over time, that they're not going to be honored anyways. And so when you suppress your needs over and over again, it doesn't just remain a conscious thing. What happens is you eventually stop feeling your needs fully. And then you wonder why you feel numb. You wonder why you feel disconnected, like something is missing, but you don't know exactly what that is. That's why. Now, what's missing is the real authentic, big ass, taking up a fuck ton of space, full and whole, authentic you. That's what's missing. The rich, unedited, unfiltered you who actually needs and wants things. So the struggle that you experience as everything in life is hard was never about your needs being too much. It's never about you being too much or the world being too much. It was never about your emotions being too much or your desire being too much or the fact that you're a person who requires real shit to thrive. The struggle is what it costs your body all day, every single day, to pretend otherwise. That's the struggle. Now, let's go to the origin. I want to talk about why that I should be low maintenance to be loved and accepted conditioning, where that comes from. So how does a person go from being a child who needs things, sometimes loudly, always naturally, without apology? That's just how children innately are. So how do you go from that to an adult who can't ask for help without feeling anxiety or their chest tightening first? It didn't happen because that's just who you are. That's definitely not why. It happened because of what you learned in your environment was safe or not safe. For example, maybe when you were a kid and you got upset, your parents, your caregivers told you that your feelings were inconvenient in some way, or they made you feel that way, or your feelings were just ignored. Maybe they were shamed, criticized. Maybe as a kid, when you asked for something, the response that you got back was like exasperation, like, oh, you're asking for something again, right? Like a deep sigh, some sort of disapproving look, or you were just flat out told, no, you can't have that, or you were guilted or shamed. And then you were taught that asking had a negative consequence. And maybe the adults around you had their own unresolved traumas and stresses, which is very, very highly likely. And they didn't have the capacity for you unless you were easy, unless you didn't ruffle any feathers, unless you were useful to them, didn't cause any problems, behaved in a way that they found tolerable amongst their own issues. And maybe if you were really good at being those things, you got warmth, you got approval, you got some sort of a connection, you were seen in some way, you got conditional love. So what happened was your nervous system did what nervous systems are designed to do. It learned through those repetitive experiences. So according to attachment theory, children don't just form the same emotional bonds with their caregivers. What actually happens is children develop whole neurological maps based on whether their caregivers are reliably responsive and attuned to them in a healthy way. So when a caregiver is consistently unavailable, dismissive, or only present or loving under certain conditions, the child's attachment system, which is literally a survival system, by the way, it's not some conscious preference mode. Their attachment system organizes itself around that reality of consistent unavailability, dismissiveness, conditional presence, and love. And that's how insecure attachment styles form, right? Anxious, avoidant, disorganized. Now, the whole I should be low maintenance to be loved and belonging belief, of course, develops through insecure attachment because the child learns through their environment that suppressing their needs was somehow more safe than expressing them. So your brain rewired itself around the absence of safe and reliable responses, essentially, to your needs. Now, when emotional expression was repeatedly met with dismissal, criticism, withdrawal, like so many of us, your limbic system, the part of your brain that processes emotions, began to encode needing itself, right? The active needing, like needing, as a threat signal because of the response to it. Not the unmet need, the act of needing itself. Make sense? Meaning your brain began to brace just because the need surfaced before the need even felt fully expressed or understood even. And so that bracing then became your default state. You didn't stop expressing your needs or having your needs because you outgrew them, but because your nervous system learned to associate your authentic expression with disconnection. And disconnection for a child absolutely registers as a survival threat because it is. A child needs connection to survive in a healthy way. So the point I'm making is that being low maintenance is not a result of you no longer having real needs because you learned early on to stop showing them. And eventually, through repetition, you stopped fully feeling them too. So, as an adult, that's not independence. And that's not you being truly easygoing. That's not being naturally low maintenance or chill. I don't really think being low maintenance is actually a natural thing because everybody has needs and wants. But what's really happening is that you're an adult whose inner child figured out that only so much of themselves was allowed to exist and then built an entire identity around staying inside that boundary. So we've talked about where that low maintenance is better conditioning and belief comes from, like the origin. And now I want to talk about what all of that is actually doing to your body today. Because being low maintenance is not just like a relational thing. It's largely a somatic or physical or body state. And so if you're operating with that conditioning, then it has probably been your body's default state for most of your life. Let me give you some examples. Think about the last time that someone offered to help you with something real. Not like buying you coffee, but like did something meaningful for you. What happens in your body when you remember or you imagine that? Is there tension? Do you maybe feel like a pull to deflect? Like not think about it too much, to minimize what happened? That physical response, that contraction, that happens not because it's your personality trait. Like it's not just you being high strung or whatever. That response is a conditioned somatic pattern. Your body learned that response the same way it learned to pull your hand back from an open flame on the stove through repetition, through repeated negative consequences of you being your authentic self with needs and wants, basically. And what happens in your body is your amygdala, which is your brain's primary threat detection center, that's the part that fires first when there's a sense of danger in your environment. And so your amygdala stores your emotional memory, not like a story with a beginning, middle, and end, but as sensation, meaning not as like that time that I asked for help and then was criticized and shamed and then I felt like a burden, but it stores it as a felt, meaning in your body, sense of danger that then reactivates whenever a similar situation arises, if it hasn't been resolved and released, updated in your body. So you're not consciously thinking, I shouldn't ask for this because I'm going to be rejected and alone. What happens is your body just automatically tightens and tenses. Your breath will get shallow. Your voice will soften, will go quiet, or your throat will constrict before any words come out. That's an old somatic pattern that engages before your conscious mind processes what's real and happening in the moment. And so that's why healing the low maintenance conditioning is not going to happen from insight alone, because the pattern does not live in your mindset. It's living in your vagal tone, in your breathing patterns, in your muscle memory, in your fascia, in the way that your shoulders rise or lower before a difficult conversation. And according to polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve, which connects your brain to your heart, your lungs, your gut, is constantly reading your environment for safety signals and then adjusting your physiological state according to those signals. That's what's happening in your body. So when your nervous system has been conditioned to interpret your authentic needs, your authentic self as unsafe, your vagal state then shifts into protection mode, basically, survival mode, because your body is already managing the threat of being too much before anything even happens in the external world. Does that make sense? Now, unfortunately, being proud of being low maintenance is actually what happens when that chronic bracing and that conditioning is socially rewarded. That's the other part of this that just reinforces that pattern. You get praised for it. You get called easygoing, self-reliant, maybe mature, and then that just strengthens the suppression, which means from a neuroplasticity level, the pattern also gets strengthened. Those neural networks get strengthened because every time your body braces and suppresses your needs and then you receive approval, that neural pathway that connects self-suppression to safety gets stronger and stronger. And then it becomes even more automatic. And then you feel like that's your identity and who you are even more, even though it's not who you are, even though it's not natural. So being low maintenance is not just like a relational style or habit. It's a fully encoded somatic memory that your nervous system has been replaying over and over and over because it genuinely believes that that is what keeps you safe and connected in the world. It's the holding of your breath when you speak or before you speak. It's the guilt or shame when someone picks up a tab or helps you in some way. It's that I'm fine that you say, even though you're not really fine. It's the you doing everything yourself so that nobody can resent you or hurt you for needing them. Now, I want to talk about that last thing for a moment because that doing everything for everybody else is a strategy. It's part of the struggle imprint that makes everything in life feel hard, even when it's not definitively or truly hard. For a lot of people, being low maintenance becomes being the one who does everything, being the one who handles it, the one who shows up first, who manages, who anticipates and plans, who holds it all together so perfectly nobody ever has to worry about them because they've already handled everything before anyone noticed anything needed to be handled. And that is overfunctioning. And it's actually the same pattern manifest a little differently. So when your nervous system learns that having needs is dangerous, it doesn't just shut down the signals of your needs. It's very adaptive. And so it finds a workaround. And that workaround for many people is competence, being useful, giving so consistently, giving so much that you are never in a position of receiving because giving feels familiar, because when you give, you're in control. That feels safer for you, right? You're setting the expectation. And that is safer because receiving means exposure or visibility. Receiving means someone now has to show up for you and your body and everything that it's learned. It does not trust that that's going to go well. And so that adaptation usually gets learned in childhood when you learned that being needed felt safer than needing, that being useful kept the connection or some form of love intact in a way that being vulnerable and needy did not. And so you learned how to handle things on your own, to be strong, to not ask for help, and to be the easy one who got things done on their own or who excelled. And that preserved a sense of connection on the surface because, maybe it kept people close to you. Maybe it kept your relationships or family dynamic more functional and safer for you. But what didn't get preserved was you, your authentic self, your feelings, you feeling safe as being big and true as your whole self with needs and real wants. And I want to talk about allostatic load, which is the cumulative physiological cost of chronic stress on your body. So studies on the burden of caregiving reveal that people who consistently overfunction for other people without receiving equal support have significant increases in cortisol dysregulation, in inflammatory markers, and vagal tone suppression over time. And that's like real research and data that demonstrates that your body is not designed for endless output without replenishment. And that's not like an Instagram quote. That is a biological fact. Your system will degrade under the constant weight of one directional giving. And the opposite is also true in research, actually, on social support. They reveal that genuine support, like the kind where you receive some sort of care or help that matters to you, you let someone show up for you in a real way, you allow yourself to be held and loved. All of that has been shown to have direct measurable effects on nervous system regulation because they activate the ventral vagal state, which is the physiological condition for feeling safe, connected, at ease. And so that means the inability to receive support isn't just emotionally isolating. It is actively keeping your nervous system from accessing one of its primary pathways for regulation, for feeling safe, for feeling at ease. You've been working so hard for so long giving so much, and all of that efforting is a large part of why you're still dysregulated and still struggling. So now I want to talk about receiving specifically, because that's the other part of this. Many people are not comfortable receiving, like a lot of people. And it's a big reason why you're frustrated that you ask for things from the universe and you don't get them. It's because your body doesn't feel safe receiving. Your nervous system doesn't feel safe receiving. For example, someone offers to help you with something real and your body just tenses, right? Even if it's like a small tension or bracing, it's still tensed, it's still braced, right? Maybe there's like tightening in your chest. Maybe there's like a reflexive no, rejection, right? I've got it, I can do it. Maybe you even feel subtle guilt or shame. Maybe a part of you gets defensive, like, how dare you think I can't do this on my own? You might have spent your whole life calling that humility or independence, but those reactions are neither of those things. Because if receiving makes you tense or uncomfortable, that is not humility, friend. That is just nervous system conditioning. So what's underneath that discomfort and tension is receiving creates visibility and vulnerability. And visibility and vulnerability for a nervous system that learned early on that being fully seen and vulnerable had negative consequences, it then registers them as dangerous exposure. And exposure that feels dangerous, of course, activates your survival stress response, because that's what happens when your body thinks you're under threat. Your amygdala doesn't distinguish the difference between a tiger chasing you and you feeling unsafe, and you feeling unsafe when someone is doing something kind for you. It's the same feeling of unsafe. It's just, so your amygdala, your nervous system is just responding to feeling unsafe. So the ick or the cringe that comes up when someone tries to help you or does help you, or that urge to like immediately reciprocate with giving them something or to deflect or minimize that help in some way, that is not your personality. That is not you being humble. And it's also not a character flaw. That's actually your implicit memory activating, meaning it's your body remembering below the level of conscious thought, meaning on a subconscious level, the negative consequences in your past of being seen needing something. So we just discussed how receiving genuine support and really letting that land in your body rather than deflecting it activates the ventral vagal circuit, meaning it turns on your parasympathetic rest and digest system. And then, of course, that measurably reduces cortisol and helps your body maintain homeostasis, like a healthy state. So what I want you to hear again is your system is specifically designed to be regulated by the support of others. And so this is why healing that conditioning is not optional. If you truly want to thrive as your highest self in your highest timeline, it's foundational to release that I'm going to be low maintenance and then everything in life is hard struggle conditioning. Because it prevents you not just from receiving, but from being your whole big and true authentic self with your real needs and wants and feelings. And I want to talk now about identity, because people think about someone who struggles as someone with like a lot of drama or chaos in their lives, or just like constant hardship, like someone who moves from crisis to crisis. But that's not the struggle identity I'm talking about. The form of a struggle identity that shows up most often is the identity of being the one who can handle it all, the one who doesn't need much, the one who easily adapts, who can manage, who can adapt, who can make things easier for everyone else, the one who doesn't make it harder, essentially, for people to be around them. And for many people, that identity feels like a virtue because it's probably been treated that way for most of your life. But it's not actually who you are, because here's what's really going on in your brain and your body and in your life. Your needs, again, they don't disappear because you stop showing them. They just go subterranean and they metabolize as tension that just lives in your body. Resentment that you can't really like locate, or loneliness even though you're in relationships that seem fine from the outside, or numbness because your whole system has been suppressing signals for so long. That numbness, by the way, is actually a dorsal vagal shutdown response, which is kind of like your nervous system's last resort conservation state when chronic suppression has been running the show for so long. It's not really emptiness. It's just nervous system shutdown. There's a difference. Okay. So what's happening neurologically is that the identity of I don't need much became a self-concept encoded in your prefrontal cortex, right? The part of your brain responsible for how you understand and you speak about yourself. And self-concepts are important because they filter your experience. They predict behavior. They tell your body what is and is not allowed in your reality. So even when your authentic needs surface, that I don't need much identity just filters them out because needing conflicts with who you have decided you are. And then that means the suppression becomes self-generated and self-reinforced automatically because you have internalized it. And unfortunately, loyalty to self-erasure can start to feel like loyalty to who you are because, again, it just feels like identity, right? It just feels like that's just how you're built, but it's really just a repeated pattern that your nervous system is operating in. And that, unfortunately, that repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates what feels like self. But familiar is not the same as true. And just because a pattern feels like you doesn't mean it is you or belongs to you. And now I want to be clear that I'm not advocating that you shift your identity to someone who is like demanding or needy in the shadow sense. That's not healing. That's not liberation. That's just a different kind of performance, really. What I'm advocating for is coherence in your authenticity. When what is true inside you and what you express externally are the same thing, are in alignment. When you don't have to edit yourself before you speak. When your body doesn't brace before you ask for help or before you receive help. When rest doesn't require justification and receiving doesn't require immediate repayment. That's the goal. Coherence between what is true in you and all levels, aligning with all levels of your reality. Because your reality will change when you stop erasing yourself by trying to be low maintenance and when you show up full and whole and real and true. Once you're no longer at war with yourself, that pattern and conditioning has a chance to resolve, to dissolve. And that is what it is. It's an internal war. You're not at war with other people. That war, that conflict that's happening inside your body every single day between what is authentically true for you and what your nervous system decided is safe to show. And that war has cost you, friend. It has cost you energy, your vitality, your capacity for genuine intimacy and connection and receiving. And over time, it's cost you your sense of self because you've been editing your true self for so long, you probably aren't even sure who that person is anymore. But the path back to your true self is not cognitive. Again, that's the part that a lot of people don't understand. You cannot think your way into a body that trusts ease and authentic expression. You cannot decide to stop bracing and then have your body stop bracing. It would be great if that was the case, but that's not how it works. Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, does not have direct authority over the threat responses that live in your amygdala, your brainstem, your body. So that means that you can totally understand the pattern and conditioning, have lots of amazing insights about them, and still your chest will tighten when someone offers to help you because understanding and embodiment are two very different things. What actually releases the pattern is giving your nervous system enough repeated experiences of safety, authenticity, that your body then can update that prediction. That's how neuroplasticity will work in your favor. You basically need new experiences to overwrite that old encoding, but not through force, not through mindset shifts, through felt meaning in your body, felt repetition of feeling safe in your authenticity, in your true needs and wants, in your true voice and bigness, taking up space and being seen and being vulnerable in receiving. Your body needs to learn through actual somatic experiences that needing and being authentic is not going to cost you safety or connection or belonging or love. That receiving does not create some sort of debt that you have to repay. That your authentic self, the one who wants things and feels things, and yeah, sometimes requires support, is not a threat to your existence in the world. When your body learns that, not just intellectually, but cellularly, that's when liberation from that old conditioning happens. And that bracing is going to soften on its own. Not because you forced it, because it no longer has a reason to engage. So if you were like, yeah, that was me throughout this episode, that is your body acknowledging something that it has been carrying for a very long time. And here's what I want to say again, because it's so important. Recognition alone is not going to release that pattern. It cannot, because the pattern doesn't live in your understanding of yourself. It lives in your body, in your breathing patterns, in how you hold your shoulders and hips, in your muscle tone, in your vagal state, in that split-second threat response that fires before your conscious mind even begins to make sense of what's happening. So you could listen to this episode like 3 times. You can share it with people, talk about it, feel totally seen, and still hold your breath before you ask for something that you want, or hold your breath before you try to set a boundary next week. You will still feel guilty when you try to rest, still find yourself overfunctioning on autopilot because your body hasn't actually gotten the somatic update yet. That gap between knowing and facilitating the release in your body, that's what my course, Liberation from Struggle, was designed to close. So liberation from struggle exists for exactly the cycle that we have been talking about today. The feeling that everything in life is just hard, no matter what you do, no matter how much you've healed, how much you have grown, how much you understand yourself. That baseline of effort and tension and a life that never gets to feel easy. Right? That's not a character flaw. That's not you being broken. And that is definitely not your destiny. It's just a conditioned somatic state. And conditioned states, when approached correctly, meaning with the right somatic work, the right nervous system sequencing, the right inner child integration, they do release. They do get updated because your body wants to let it go. Your body does not want to keep bracing and tensing and battling an inner war. That chronic stress, truly, not metaphorically, degrades your body and your brain's health in real and measurable ways. So of course your body is like, I don't want to be repeating this pattern. So in this course, we're not doing more mindset work. We actually connect with your body. We unwind what is in your body and we retrain your nervous system to experience ease as safe rather than suspicious. We do the inner child work that's at the root of that low maintenance conditioning, and we recalibrate your emotional baseline so that struggle stops being the norm, that you have stopped questioning. So it's 8 high impact modules with real subconscious, real somatic and nervous system transformation, where you're finally going to get to meet that version of yourself where daily life is not hard by default. Because you don't need to keep proving your worth by being easy. You get to be fully you, fully big, fully honest, fully seen, fully supported. And that is not a reward for healing hard enough. That's just what life's going to be like when your body finally stops bracing all the time. And that freedom is available to you inside Liberation from Struggle. So I want you to join me in that course. Click the link in the show notes. All right, so now for your action step for the week. I want you to identify one real need that you currently have that you have not voiced to anyone. Not like a preference, like a real genuine need, like something that you have been handling alone, that you've been minimizing, that you've been pretending isn't an issue, but is an issue for you. And so this week, I want you to tell one safe person, not a rando, tell one safe person about it without immediately trying to follow it with some solution. You're not trying to fix it. You're not deflecting it either. Like you're not going to say, it's not that bad though. I don't want you to do that either. I want you to be real about it. But I want you to self-regulate before, meaning ground yourself, slow your breathing down, give yourself loving self-touch, give yourself a hug, self-regulate, and then just state that need as plainly as truth, like just something real in you in your life. And I want you to stay present in your body while you do it so that you notice what's happening during that moment of exposure. Notice what happens Like, is there tightening? Do you feel an urge to take it back, to soften it? Just notice what happens in your body, notice the urges, and just stay present anyway, regardless of what happens. And don't take back what you say. Now, you're not going to do this to get the need met, even though that may happen. And if so, yay, receive the support because you deserve it. Allow yourself to feel safe receiving how that need may get met. But that is not the goal of this exercise. You're just doing this to give your nervous system some new data, okay? To give it a lived experience of authenticity without catastrophe, without collapse. So this experience, if you repeat it over time, is actually how your body updates that old encoding around being seen, needing something, resulting in danger or negative consequence. This is how you literally create the conditions for the pattern to change through neuroplasticity. One safe, authentic moment at a time. So practice that this week, self-regulating and then expressing a need, a true need, not for the purpose of having it met yet, but just for the purpose of feeling safe, being authentic. Because every time you make yourself smaller, every time you swallow a need or deflect or avoid support or perform peace that you don't actually feel, you're not just reinforcing an outdated pattern, you're also reinforcing the version of your life where nothing fundamentally changes. Not because you're consciously choosing to continue struggling, but because self-abandonment is a signal like any other signal in your reality. Your reality organizes around what your mind-body system consistently confirms as true about you. And when your system's daily lived experiences, my needs don't matter, my authentic self is too much, I am most safe when I am least visible, that's literally the instruction your entire system is running on. Not your conscious thoughts, not the affirmations that you speak, not your intentions, not the photos on your vision board, not your prayers to the universe, not your desire for more or less struggling. That's the thing that people don't understand. Your nervous system reflects your mind-body system, and your nervous system signal, like your subconscious signal, overrides all of what I just listed. And that means that every day that you continue this pattern is another day that you are actively, even unconsciously, confirming to every layer of your being that the life you actually want is not for you. I'm not making a judgment. That's just how the mechanics of human reality is shaped by a human nervous system. So now that means the inverse is also true, and that's very important to state and understand. The moment you stop abandoning yourself, even just a little bit, even by stating plainly one honest need to one safe person, you're already changing your signal because you're telling your nervous system, your whole mind-body system, and thus your lived reality, something different. And not through forcing, but through truth. And truth, when your body finally gets to live it freely and safely, truth is the only thing that truly changes anything. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope this episode awakened you, inspired you, and reminded you of what's possible when you love, heal, and free yourself and reclaim your highest truth and power. If this show has transformed or enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please like, save, and share this episode and leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify. And subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. Your support is deeply appreciated and truly helps this show so much. And if today's episode resonated with you, don't stop here. Go deeper. My book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, expands on these teachings and gives you the missing framework about self-love that no one is talking about. So get your copy today to start reading and loving yourself more. And if you're ready for the ultimate healing journey with daily instruction and guidance from me, I'd love to see you inside the Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. Remember, you were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. It's time to claim everything you want and more. All the links are in the show notes. I'll see you next time.